All right. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes to see if anyone else will be logging on and tuning in.
What up, Joe?
What's up?
No, not
How you
much.
doing, Nicholas?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited to learn about Chinese medicine or something.
Yeah,
Woo!
or something.
Yeah.
What up, Nicholas?
Uh-huh. Sorry, I'm eating dinner. I'm finishing up.
Oh, enjoy your dinner.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll just admit a couple more people here, and then we'll go ahead and get started. There we go. Okay, wonderful. Oh, I just got one more.
Oh,
Mhm.
wait. And Joe, do you know an Andy Beebe from college?
I do. I was gonna ask you
Yes.
that.
That's so funny. Yeah, he's like moved to Pittsburgh and is in the stand-up comedy scene with me. He's one of my pretty good buddies. He's like big
I
sports guy with that
cannot
mouth.
wait to pick your brain.
Yeah, small world. I couldn't believe it. He was like, yeah, some girl I knew from college went to like either Costa Rica or Africa and like did Iboga. And I was like, no, yeah. And it turned out you were the same girl. So I was like, that's crazy. But he's doing well.
Small world.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. That's amazing. It's fascinating.
Hmm.
Let's see. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started here. I'm just gonna make sure I mute everyone so that we can go ahead and begin. Welcome all. Yeah, we have a very amazing, insightful presentation that's going to be shared by our very own Stephanie Osborne. And we're really looking forward to sharing this with our community. It's a really, really well put presentation. Stephanie was just giving me a bit of a rundown beforehand. So I'm excited for her to share. If y'all have met Stephanie, one thing about her is that she will get into Chinese medicine. So, without further ado, well, I'll have you take it away.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm gonna start doing a screen share and take you on a journey into Chinese medicine. All right. And Iboga. So observations and implications. So why I specifically use that word is there's no taxonomy, there's no research or written record on Chinese medicine and Iboga. This is all from my direct experience and observations. And very much this medicine is subjective and objective. So things like pulse, which I'll get into, are like my methods of understanding Iboga's work with Chinese medicine from a subjective perspective, but just to say, like, a lot of this is I'm sorry, from an objective perspective, but a lot of this is my subjective observation here. All right. Let me just get this out of the way. Okay, cool. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm a licensed and board certified physician of Chinese medicine. So I rarely say I'm an acupuncturist because I feel like it doesn't encompass the full scope of my practice. So while that does include acupuncture, it also includes herbal medicine, biomedicine, lifestyle counseling. Chinese medicine is very much a way of living, as well as body work. I have my bachelor's in psychology, bachelor's in health sciences, as well as a master's in Oriental medicine. I know that's some people hear that, they're like, that's a wild name. I didn't name the masters, but that's what I got. So my journey with Iboga began in 2024, and within my first three ceremonies, I really got my Iboga miracle, my new lease on life. So driven by that, just that deep gratitude and inspiration, and yeah, for the because if it weren't for the people who practice the Bwiti tradition and keep Iboga so sacred, if it weren't for them, I wouldn't be who and where I am today. So driven by that gratitude and just a heart call, I went to Africa last July and I got initiated into the Mabundi tradition of the Misoko branch. And I'm currently a facilitator and Chinese medicine practitioner at Rune Wisdom. So I do have a podcast where I talk a lot about my journeys with Iboga and Chinese medicine as well. So if a lot of these concepts, I'm really just scratching the surface with them. So if you want to learn more, if you want to learn about more about my remote work, I do Chinese medicine diagnosis online as well as mentorship. You can find my information at schoolofwhispers.com. Okay. So TCM basics, again, scratching the surface, but giving you a basic understanding. Chinese medicine is an ancient system of medicine with a holistic lens. And so the way they developed this medicine was through observations within nature. And they saw that what is happening outside of us is also happening within us. So we're not separate from nature. And I think this graph here of the five element theory, which is a really pivotal piece to Chinese medicine diagnosis and treatment and lifestyle, really, I think, illustrates that beautifully. So fire, earth, metal, water, and wood, what happens outside of us, this is all happening within us. The fire is the element of the heart, the earth, digestive system, the metal, earth, water, kidneys, wood, liver, and whatnot. And why I like this graphic is because it shows this is the generating sequence and this is the controlling sequence. So it's all interconnected. None of it exists within a vacuum. It happens all together. So we're going to discuss some key players within Chinese medicine before we really get into the nuances of Iboga. These key players are yin and yang, qi and blood, and the three treasures. So yin and yang. So we are known in Chinese medicine as the pivot point between heaven and earth, which means that we contain the celestial, energetic, unseen movement of the world of yang, as well as that dark, earthly, nourishing matter that is the yin. So while I'm not going to get into all the nuances here, I wrote these out so you can skim it because when I'm trying to understand somebody's pattern as well as understand an herb from this perspective of Chinese medicine, the very first thing we look at is it yin or is it yang? And yin and yang, one cannot exist without the other. You know, the yin contains the yang, and within the yang, there is the yin. So they're constantly in this state of mutual consumption and transformation. Two other key players here are qi and blood. So qi is our life force energy. It's constantly moving and unseen, which makes it yang in nature. Its roles within the body are transformation, maintaining growth and development, warming. So I had a teacher who once told me that cold is death and warming is life. So if you've ever talked to me at a retreat or just know me in general, you know that I am not about that salad and raw juice, cold ice drink life. Because in Chinese medicine, it goes against the nature of how our body wants to be. And the warming aspect keeps things in constant movement and flow. She is also responsible for defense against pathogens, as well as holding fluids and organs in place within our body. Blood is a form of dense, substantial qi, and it's responsible for shuttling nutrients through the body, so it is extremely nourishing. So that makes it yin in nature. A phrase we're very all about like very short, quippy phrases in Chinese medicine. So a phrase that's really popular is qi is the commander of blood, and blood is the mother of qi. What that means is blood holds qi and allows it to do its job within the body, but blood would have no animation or movement without the qi. So as you can see, again, there's this movement of comparison and duality and interconnection here. So the three treasures is often depicted by an image of a candle. So we would discuss qi. Qi is our life force. It's represented by the flame. So it's our active power and warmth. Then we have Jing. We're going to really get into Jing because Jing has a special relationship with Iboga. But how that's represented is the candle wax. So it's our essence and vital reserve. It feels every function within the body. And we are given one candle in our life. We do have forms of Jing that can be influenced by our life, but truly we have the wax. And so if we deplete our wax, it naturally goes down because life, we are human, but lifestyle and trauma, things of the like will deplete our wax, our Jing, our essence reserve. And in turn, that will dim our flame and will dim the light. So the light that's emitted from the flame is our Shen. Our Shen is our spirit and our mind. It is the light and warmth that's radiated from the flame. It is our presence and our consciousness. So when people say, eyes are the window to the soul, the eyes are the window to the Shen. And so that light that's emitted from our chi, that flame, is very much seen through our eyes. And our Shen, and I want to mention this now because I'll touch on it again, it is our ability to conceptualize the intangible. To me, that's really beautiful because that insinuates that you don't necessarily, and we'll talk about the mind, what in from a Chinese medicine perspective, from the heart in a little bit here, but you don't truly need the intellect to conceptualize the intangible because those sorts of things are actually understood on a deeper level from the spirit. One of my favorite quotes by Rumi is, "Silence is the language of God, all else is poor translation." And so I feel like that really helps conceptualize the role of the Shen in our lives. So to touch on quickly, Chinese medicine is an energetic medicine. So we have things called meridians. Meridians emerge from our 12 main organs: lung, large intestine, spleen, stomach, heart, small intestine, pericardium, which is the muscle that surrounds the heart, the sanjiao, which is also known as a triple burner, basically our metabolism, the kidney, liver, and gallbladder. So we see these 12 main organs as oceans of energy. And emerging from those oceans are rivers and streams that we call meridians. And they land on the surface of our skin. And those where we have like an accumulation of that energy are called acupuncture points. So this is a classic Chinese medicine map of the 12 meridians, but I love this image as well because where we have an influx of acupuncture points is around the throat, the abdomen, the wrists, the knees, and the ankles. And so yes, it's an energetic medicine, but it's also backed up by science. It's so funny. I recently saw this article. It was like scientists are like agreeing or something like that, that Chinese medicine works. And it's like, thank you for your agreement, but also we don't need it. The medicine doesn't need it to be viable. And then just to touch really quickly, each organ has its own relationship with qi. I'll touch on that a little bit, but for example, the kidneys, they grasp qi. The liver is the general of qi. So they all have their own relationship with qi and blood, its own energetic movement, spiritual quality. I have this really great podcast series on the different aspects of the spirit and Shen in Chinese medicine, and also season and time of day. So it's all just as morning turns into afternoon, evening, night, it's all interconnected and related. So today's focus, because of Iboga and its influence, is going to be the spleen, stomach, small intestine and large intestine, heart, liver, and kidney. So before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about Iboga as an herb. So in herbal medicine, the part of the plant that we ingest, it tells you something about how it works in the body. So for example, a vine is going to work on the extremities. and it's going to be about connection. A flower has a, think of how a flower grows on a stem and how it has this big opening. So a flower is going to be very uplifting and opening, create a sort of high, if you will. So roots, on the other hand, they work in the deepest spaces of the body and they draw awareness inward and anchor downwards. Traditionally, roots are used for fertility, building essence, which we'll get into a lot more later, as well as strengthening the bones. So Tabernanthe iboga. It is an evergreen shrub from Central West Africa, which originates from the regions known today as the Congo Republic, Gabon, and Cameroon. So what we ingest is the root bark of the Tabernanthe iboga shrub. So it's known, I think, most popularly, it's most popular for its anti-addictive and entheogenic or psychedelic properties. But I think what is really can help people understand too on, the full picture, it's also antiviral, antiparasitic, antifungal. And so, the people in Africa, they eat it for more than just like they were giving us Iboga in small doses to help with prevent malaria. So it's more than just, I mean, yes, its properties of its visionary properties are so unique and sacred, but it's also more than that. And then, of course, the neuroplasticity, I'm not going to really touch on because that's not really my realm, but Troy has a really great talk on YouTube if you want to learn more about Iboga and its influence on the brain. So from a TCM perspective, Iboga drains dampness, moves chi, and builds essence. I'm going to touch on every single one of those actions. And then as I mentioned before, the pathways it acts on are spleen, stomach, intestines, heart, liver, and kidney. All right. You can't ingest anything and not talk about the journey of where it begins, which is in the spleen and stomach, and then it makes its way to the small intestine and large intestine. So the food we eat and the liquid we ingest, the herbs that we ingest, it's transformed into something called Gucci, which is to me a silly word. Gucci, the energy from our Gucci that is clear and pure is going to move up through the lungs and the heart and be circulated all through the body, through the mind, to the kidneys, all over. And then the energy that is turbid or unclean, that is not usable, viable for the body, is going to be moved into the small and large intestine, where they do a further process of separating clear from turbid chi. So Iboga is a big chi herb. If you've ever come to an Iboga experience, you understand like it's not a subtle when you have a large amount, it's not subtle. And so because this herb is so strong on the system, it's important to ensure that when you come to a retreat or to Africa, to ensure that your body isn't burdened by drugs and toxins, because we'll touch on later how it influences the liver, but also stagnating food, food that has little to no nutritional quality, or in my opinion, cold foods. But I think that's a bit of a relative thing. And then an extremely sedentary lifestyle. One of the best ways we can move chi is through moving our bodies. So it's important, it's not necessary, but it's very helpful to sort of start thinking from this point of view, especially if you're somebody who's susceptible to chi stagnation. So dampness. Dampness is one of those pathogens, as I mentioned earlier, that is turbid, that is supposed to move down. It begins in the spleen and the stomach, and it comes from like those toxins or foods with little to no nutritional value. And the visual I like to give people is, think of a bowl of fruit that's been forgotten and left behind. It's going to start to grow mold, which in that in itself is going to create an environment. And so dampness is a turbid energy, and some early signs and symptoms of dampness in the body is bloating and gas, sluggishness, fatigue, sweatband headache. It's like you feel this pressure around your head, brain fog, heaviness in the limbs, issues breathing, soft stools, and poor memory. So long term, so dampness is sort of intangible, unseen. sort of pathogen until we start to have these signs and symptoms. Ideally, it's going to be moved by our digestive fire, but when it's not long term, it can do something called obstruct the orifices. It starts to become more tangible and it turns into something that we call phlegm. So long-term signs and symptoms of dampness would be either diarrhea or constipation. And when there's a movement, there's going to be a lot of phlegm. Just phlegm in general is a sign of long-term dampness. It's turning into phlegm. Obesity and mental illness. So specifically with a lapse of reality, this is really interesting to me. So as I mentioned, dampness obstructs the orifices, so eyes, ears, mouth, and our ability to take the world in. And so when dampness is seated for a long time in the body, it starts to affect our ability to understand reality for what it is. So, for example, say if someone's having a schizophrenic episode or a manic bipolar episode, and maybe there's extreme paranoia or quote unquote hallucinations, there's going to be what we would call that is phlegm, long-term dampness turning into phlegm, misting the mind. Other symptoms, insomnia, and then in extreme cases, dementia, Alzheimer's, and there's so much more. So our treatment for purging dampness, well, we don't really practice this in the West, but it would be prescribing a vomitive herb. But that's not really kind of culturally sound. So what we will do is we'll prescribe an herbal formula that clears dampness through urination. Chinese and acupuncture as well, we will do points that induce urination. So Iboga, there is a purgative aspect to it, but also in terms of vomiting. But also for myself, I remember being in shock the first time I had Iboga. I was urinating so much, and it was not conducive to how much water I was drinking. And that was when that first sort of inkling of like, oh, Iboga purges dampness. And then also looking at the role of Iboga, how it opens up the orifices. If you've had an Iboga experience, then you understand that your ability to see, hear, feel, smell even is absolutely heightened. And so, some people will say, there's hallucinations happening, but I would argue it's your orifices being opened up so you can take in the intangible world so much more clearly. And then just on the urination factor, what supported this as well is just guests telling me, like, again, they're surprised at how much they've been peeing during their ceremony. Okay, Iboga and the liver. So I mentioned earlier, the liver, we call it the general of chi. So the liver is responsible for making sure that chi goes this way, that way, this way, does exactly what it's supposed to do, that the soldiers are in line. And so when there is stagnation within the system, I'm going to look and see what is the liver pathway doing? Why is it not doing its job? Before I get a little bit deeper into that, I want to talk about observation on pulse. So before people have ceremony, I've now adopted the protocol of listening to people's pulses. People think I'm taking their blood pressure or their BPM, but what I'm doing is I'm feeling the energetic quality of what's happening within their body. So on the left side, it's more the yin blood side. So I'm going to be feeling for the heart, which also is the emotions in the spirit, the liver, the detox pathways, but the emotion of the liver is frustration as well as repression. And then kidney yin. And then the right side is going to be more yang and qi. So lung, also including the immune system. Spleen, that's the digestive system. And then kidney yang and ming men. I'll touch on ming men later. Typically, over life, kidneys are pulse is going to be depleted. Something that's also really interesting is in younger people, I have felt a depletion of the pulse when they're really, really caught in a trauma narrative of being like very victimized by the things that have happened to them and sort of looking at their life from that lens. I found that really, especially recently, really insightful and interesting to see how that affects the kidney energy. And their kidneys are also a direct insight into what's happening with our overall essence, our vitality. So with Iboga pulses, I've noticed that it was funny because I was treating people and I was like, how is it that everybody's pulse is so strong and rooted, especially in the kidney area? Like, there's no way that all these people are coming in with the same sort of pattern. And then I realized, oh, they've all eaten Iboga. And so that's just further contributed to my understanding of what this herb is doing, not just for the body, but for the energetic system. But another quality within the pulse that I've noticed after people ingest Iboga is that it becomes wiry. How I would explain wiry, it's kind of like you're plucking a guitar string. It's very tight and it's very kind of like punchy in your face. And that indicates that there's a lot of chi moving and there could be a susceptibility to stagnation. So this is partly why Joe, I mean, I don't think they did it from a Chinese medicine perspective, but there's a what's that word? There's an understanding, a sort of assumption one can understand from both a Western and Eastern perspective that Iboga is going to have an effect on the liver. And so that's why doing the liver detox and as I mentioned before with the diet, incorporating that before you come to the retreat. And so, how you can support your body in moving chi is through diet, gentle movement, gentle breath. The breath is such a strong diagnostic and treatment term. For example, if someone's breathing and it kind of sounds like that, I know that there's something happening within the kidney pathway. If someone's that kind of sound, then I know that there's a stagnation specifically within the liver pathway. So when I treat people, I often encourage them to take deep breaths and to use their voice. That's actually one of the quick, dirty ways of moving chi within the body is having a long sigh with that audible exhale. And of course, rest and fluids. And this is everything that they incorporate within a root and wisdom retreat. The diet's very specific. So is the movement. We incorporate breath work. We make sure we have all these different types of fluids available for you to have. And of course, sleep is of primary importance. So the key here is to support the process, not force it. Forcing creates more stagnation. So an example of where I've seen somebody force is coming in with expectations and very, very specific intention. There's nothing wrong with having intention, but Troy and I were actually discussing it a couple days ago, how working with ayahuasca, that's a great place to work with an intention. You work with the medicine on something very specific. But with Iboga, sometimes the best thing to do is just kick back and let the process happen and let the chi, let the herb do its job and let the chi move. So everything we do at Root and Wisdom, it's not about like forcing you to be one way or another. It's about supporting you within your process. We're, as facilitators, we're the hands and the feet of Iboga, bringing you exactly whatever you need. So based on all of this, I would make the recommendation at least 3 to 5 days post-retreat to avoid any sort of long-standing stagnation, especially again if you're susceptible. If you want to know if you're susceptible to stagnation, you're gonna have to work with a practitioner to understand what your body's doing. But yeah, 3 to 5 days, kind of continuing that lifestyle within the retreat, being out in nature. Green is so healing for the liver on the eyes. So, and then we have ibogaine in the liver. So just to briefly touch, ibogaine is exclusively um, processed through the liver. Again, that's why that liver detox before retreat is very important. And this, from the research, from what I understand, could put a strain on hepatic function. So in TCM terms, any sort of stressor on the liver will bring up, as I mentioned before, repressed, suppressed emotions. And this is a gift. I know I've used words such as strain, stress, stagnation, and it can kind of create this story in your mind of like, why would I want to do this then? It's like, well, with the gift of pulling up what's been deeply rooted within and bringing it up to the awareness, then it can move out. So Taoism is a really integral piece of Chinese medicine. And in the Taoist way, we say that in order to move forward, sometimes we need to take steps backwards or sideways. So, it's kind of like that classic trope that, the path and the journey to get from here to here, it's not about it being linear. We didn't come for simple and easy. We came here for evolution. And that's the gift of putting quote unquote stress on the system with a very specific goal in mind. And then let's talk about the heart and the Shen. So for me, Iboga is the most heart opening herb I have ever experienced. So the heart in Chinese medicine is the house of the Shen. As I mentioned before, the Shen is our spirit, our mind, and the undying aspect of our being. And it also it's our ability to conceptualize the intangible. So the mind here is very different from the mind up in the brain. The heart has its own intelligence. It has its own electromagnetic field. If you're interested in learning more about that, I suggest looking into Heart Math Institute. Maybe I'm saying that right, but yeah, there's an institute that does a lot of, yeah, I can't remember what the name of that is. If someone knows what I'm talking about, wants to put that in the chat, go ahead. Um, but there's this deep understanding that happens when we move through the Iboga, the classic mind purge. Um, and when the mind is quiet, we can hear the whispers of the heart. So the heart doesn't speak like I mentioned before, like how language is a poor translation of the silence that is the language of God. So the heart speaks within emotions and sensations within the body. And for me, I see that as that's the ultimate truth here. And so Iboga, it helps us move all of the stories, all of the caca nonsense, the social media, everything that we're putting into our eyes and into our system, so that we can find a special silence. If it doesn't happen the next day, it happens at least 2 to 3 days later. And there, in that space, you can truly open yourself up to the continuation of the truth, the capital T truth that comes with Iboga. So my observations from retreats, as well as my own experiences, a lot of people, as I mentioned before, how the eyes are the window to the Shen. You can see it in their eyes when they come and they're living from the mind. There's a bit of a fogginess. There's a posture to it. There's also a sort of subduing of one's essence and vitality. And as they go through their process, it's really beautiful to watch them no longer live from thinking that they are the mind and they are their body, understanding that there's an undying aspect to their being that's opened up through their process within ceremony. And then last thing I'll say about the heart and the Shen and Iboga is I know for myself and for other people, we report that the wisdom that comes with Iboga is really, really simple. Like I remember one time I asked, like, what is chi and blood? And I thought about chi as the commander of blood, blood is the mother of chi. Um, or this phrase I put down here, one heart sees better than two eyes. That was on my tea bag right before going into a ceremony. And I'm not going to even try to bother to put language to what that really means to me. But because of my whole process and that heart opening aspect, I was able to understand these concepts on such a deep, deep level. All right, kidneys. So as I mentioned from earlier about the pulse, typical observations of the pulse is our kidney energy is depleted over our lifetime. The kidneys are our source of I think I spelled that wrong. Okay, primordial water and fire. So when I'm seeing a disbalance of yin and yang, which is truly, there's no such thing as perfect balance. What we're looking for is harmony. So when I'm looking to harmonize a yin and yang nature within the body, then I'm going to be looking and feeling and looking at the body from a kidney perspective. What is the internal fire and water that's going to influence everything else in the body? What is it doing? What is it up to? Our kidneys are also the source of something called the Ming Men, which translates to gate of vitality. So, um, the Ming Men is our source of Jing. We also call it the Ming Men fire, but truly it is the source of fire and water. And where it lives is right here around the lower back, but also for the space from our belly button to our pubic bone. This space is also called our dantian. So it's a really potent reservoir of Jing and Qi. Jing is our vitality, our ability for fertility, as well as power. And we'll talk a bit about this later. So some symptoms of kidney deficiency would be dark bags under the eyes, lackluster to the skin, a depletion of energy, chronic fatigue, cortisol, high cortisol levels, as well as adrenal fatigue will fall in that category. Hair will be brittle and dry, falling out, and chronic knee and lower back pain. So my observations is really interesting. I actually have a friend who she told me that whenever her husband has lower back pain, which is very few and far between, he's in his late 70s, but he'll microdose some Iboga and the back pain will go away immediately. But also just I mean, I used to have those dark bags under my eyes, and since working with Iboga, that's gone away through time. You also see this really beautiful sheen to the skin. People's energy and their circadian rhythms level out during the retreats, which, yes, Iboga is going to be helpful for that. And also the lifestyle that we provide at Root and Wisdom, I think, is also a key factor there. For myself with the hair, my hair grows like crazy now ever since I started to work with Iboga. And when I went to Africa, for 17 days, I kid you not, my hair grew 3 to 4 inches. I remember my family, like me coming home, my family was weirded out by how long my hair was. And so that's a really interesting observation too. So just to give you an idea, the Ming Men fire, just to touch on, is this our breathing, harmonizes sexual function for healthy libido. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Iboga as an aphrodisiac towards the end. It's our source of yuan qi, which is original qi. It enables growth and development. It assists the heart in housing the mind, and Iboga has this beautiful um, ability to anchor the heart, anchor the Shen into the heart. And then it helps with bladder function as well as spleen and stomach digestion. So again, it just further builds this illustration of how um, eating iboga and its movement as a root of going down and deep, and then the kidneys also mimic that function of sinking, how this all contributes to our overall vitality through the Mingmen fire. So let's talk a little bit more about Jing, what it even is, because this is where Iboga's deepest work becomes visible, in my opinion. So we have two different types of Jing. We have pre-heaven essence or congenital Jing. This is from our mother and our father. It's also our sperm and menstrual blood. So if you come to a retreat, what's really beautiful is we do the face painting, and it's a mixture of white clay and red clay. And this represents the beautiful duality of our precious essence as men and women, women's menstrual blood as well as a man's sperm. Our pre-heaven essence is our genetic constitution and baseline vitality. And the thing is, it is finite. So just to touch on sperm and menstrual blood, uh, if something like this is, yes, you can influence the quality through post heaven, which we'll get into a moment. You can influence the quality, but that precious essence is finite. So my question is, you know, why are we, living this lifestyle where we're just giving it away? Like men just, ejaculating wherever, whenever they want, like they have to get it out of their system. If you change your perspective, and if you talk to Troy or myself during the retreats, the semen retention is actually a really impotent power practice that we would encourage all men to do, especially after ingesting Iboga. And then looking at menstrual blood, where in Western medicine, we want to stop the period. We see it as a weakness, but actually it is a sign of our vitality. So that menstrual blood that we release and get to look at every month is a precious gift. Okay, so while this is finite, the good news is we can influence our post-heaven essence through our lifestyle. So through Gu Qi, which again was food qi, as well as Zong Qi. That is a qi that we inhale in. So again, we influence our Jing by how we choose to live. It's up to us. Indicators of Jing decline or depletion: premature grain or hair loss, hearing loss or ringing in the ears, specifically a low-pitched ringing. A high-pitched ringing is actually more of a liver pathway disbalance, chronic fatigue and poor recovery, infertility or low libido, dull complexion and skin aging, fragile bones and joint pain, lower back pain or weakness in the knees, emotional fatigue, fear, or anxiety. And I would honestly argue my observations within retreats and with myself, the Iboga's helped with, it's touched on all of these things as a medicinal herb or a power plant, however you want to look at it. So last thing we'll touch on with Jing is its influence on something called the Sea of Marrow. So Jing is necessary for mental clarity, concentration, and cognitive function. Within our kidney system, Jing is transformed into something called marrow. So, looking at it from a Western perspective, what do we know about marrow? Well, I think about actual bone marrow. Like if you've ever eaten bone marrow, you see that it's a slippery substance. Um, it's also from a Western perspective, we understand that it's within the bones, same in Chinese medicine, and it also creates the formation, it helps with the formation of blood. And blood is really, as I touched on, as you can understand by now, blood is extremely precious within the body. So in Chinese medicine, marrow nourishes the bones, the spinal cord, and the brain. So I think I can't help but think about the myelin sheets, which enable the processing from one neuron to another, that rapid processing in Iboga and Ibogaine influence on that. It's again that slippery substance. So I could equate marrow to that substance within the myelin sheets. But again, that's not really my territory. I recommend you look at that YouTube video I told you about earlier about Iboga and the brain. So we know in Western medicine, the brain and the spinal cord are the central nervous system, and the central nervous system is the sea of marrow. Some signs of depletion of marrow is poor memory, cognitive fog, difficulty concentrating, and overall life loss of vitality. So to really briefly touch on the research on ibogaine, what does it tell us? That there is this influence on neuroplasticity. It helps a neuronal network reorganize, repair, and form new connections. And this is a direct nourishment of the sea of marrow here. So some final notes here. I wanted to touch on Iboga versus other plants such as ayahuasca, marijuana, and other plants and psychedelics. I would mention probably NDMA and acid here as well. So with plants such as ayahuasca and marijuana, they actually deplete our essence. And let's look at this from a neutral lens. I know the word depletion is a really strong word, and we would ask, why would I want to do that? And again, it's the Taoist way. Sometimes we have to move backwards or sideways to move forwards. But what I've noticed with ayahuasca is people with long-term, like I read this book on ayahuasca shamans, and long-term drinking of ayahuasca will erode the teeth, and the teeth are our bones. So, and then as well, when I see people within ayahuasca retreats and in my own experience, there's like this big energy and this zest for life. And then when we get home, there's a bit of a crash. Really, any herb or substance that creates a high experience immediately after ingestion, we would call in Chinese medicine a false qi, because it creates this illusion of vitality, but really it's pulling from the essence, and then the body will have to rebuild over time. Um, Marijuana is another, it's a really essence drainer. And I've been studying this for years. It's really interesting. It actually dries out our primordial water and dries out our essence. And then the fire flares and it burns everything up. It's also a flower. So as I mentioned in the beginning of my talk, as a flower, it does create this high. But then there's this crash afterwards. Iboga, on the other hand, if you've eaten Iboga, you know what I'm saying when you first eat it, you're like, whoa. And there's this a little bit of this depletion and exhaustion. But what happens after that 24 to 48 hours is that overall boost of vitality. So there is no false chi to Iboga. It's truly coming from within. So Iboga is an aphrodisiac. So, what I've come to learn through studying the Dantian, through my Qigong practice, and through Chinese medicine is, the question is, what even is sexual energy? Well, if you look at it from this Chinese medicine perspective, it is our vitality, it's our life. And when I don't know about you all, but like I grown up being kind of taught that it's something that you give away. And before I started working with Iboga as a power plant, I would feel this influx of sexual energy and just want to like get rid of it. It was too much for me. I had this story that I was like, "Whoa, this is a lot, and I gotta get it out of my system. I'm anxious." But the truth is this is a power that's moving through you. And so my question is do we really want to just give it away? And what happens when we don't? I know for myself, been this boost of just overall vitality in my life, but as well as creative energy. And then Iboga and fertility. So when I was in Africa, sometimes it's difficult to get a straight answer in Africa with the people who practice the Bwiti. I've heard we can sometimes call them the Bwiti, the Bwitis, the Bwitin. Who knows? But yeah, so this is an answer based off of translation and just my inquiry. But they see fertility as a matter of the ancestors. So when Western medicine fails on a woman who's trying to get pregnant, she'll go into a Bwiti ceremony and ingest Iboga in order to communicate with her ancestors to know where does there need to be peace made, but most importantly, where does there need to be made space. And in Chinese medicine, we see it as the same way. Like we don't really talk about someone having like being infertile. It's actually very rare that somebody's literally infertile. What is happening is there's a disharmony, a pattern that's making it difficult to have space within the body to create new life. And how I would treat that is by tapping into deep ancestral meridians. We actually call those the extraordinary meridians. And then overall observations on physical and spiritual resilience. So over here is a photo of me with my spiritual mother, Mama Toto. And she is one of the most big energy, vital women I've ever met. She was actually going through some health issues while we were there, and that did not stop her. But in Africa, the way they do ceremonies, you're up all night dancing, hitting drums, singing, and it's actually the elders who hold down the fort and make sure that everybody is bringing on the energy, and they'll stop everything and call people out if they're not bringing that big chi, that essence to the table. So it's just really special for me to watch that because in our society the elders are or even I think elder is actually a term that we earn. So people who are older, there's this depletion and lack of vitality and also just spiritual resilience in general. uh Gosh, the Virgo in me is like look at all these typos like goodness, Steffi. But yeah, the spiritual resilience in general with the African people is really, it's really really special, and it's more than Iboga. It is the way of the Bwiti, and that has been woven into the overall experience that is Iboga in general. And then just again to touch on observations for myself and others, the change in the eyes. I know personally for myself, my eyes have been dark brown most of my life, and since ingesting Iboga, they've actually turned into this yellowish greenish color. And then When I shared that, I think it was with Joe, she said that Iboga has this reputation for lightening the eye color. So, my question is like, my eye color, is that a representation of the spirit here? Yes, I'm gonna have to leave soon, so let me wrap this up. Hair I mentioned, and then overall pain relief. This is really interesting for me. I used to have a lot of chronic pain and instability in my joints, and since ingesting Iboga, I over a long period of time, I don't experience that anymore. I think within the design of the retreats, there's with the Zaidas massages, there's a factor there, but it's also repeated within the guests with chronic pain. And when I give people a treatment, I always ask, like, how are you feeling physically? Because that's where we begin. And they're like, it's crazy. I don't have any pain right now. And then just overall strength in general. I used to see myself as a very weak, low energy person, and that's just completely changed through my work. And some of it's through Iboga, but a lot of it too is through the lessons and the teachings that Joe and Troy have woven into the program at Root and Wisdom. So as they will tell you, Iboga is neutral. It truly is up to us. So while it builds our essence and does all of these things, what my spiritual mother says about Iboga is the gifts and the curses of Iboga are tenfold. So it's really important that you take that gift of neuroplasticity and make it meaningful and worth your while. And everything that's designed again within Root and Wisdom is to move chi and build essence. And just the teachings that they have put into the beginning, pre-retreat, during retreat, post-retreat, that in itself, the cessation of suffering, which is truly like the goal within Root and Wisdom in so many ways. You could never eat an essence building herb or food and just focus on that, and that in itself will build your essence. So we call Iboga the hunter of truth. And so when you ingest Iboga, that energy, that strength that comes, that's not false chi. That is all you. So we're moving from that exhaustion to this pure vitality. And the last thing I'll say is an observation. Again, Iboga is neutral, so this isn't necessarily true, but for myself and for some other guests, it's really beautiful to watch. It's like this herb is sort of reprogramming us to prioritize our own vitality through lifestyle shifts. Like, for example, for myself, I used to overexercise and undereat. And that was not something I was aware of. It wasn't a goal that I had with Iboga. And yet now with Iboga, like how I move my body and how I nourish myself has completely shifted just from a natural inclination. And I've seen that, I've heard that reported from others. So that's me. Thank you so much. If you want to learn more about Chinese medicine or my journey, you can listen to the School of Whispers podcast. It's available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and other platforms. You can also look up School of Whispers on Instagram and you'll find my information there. Or you can simply just go to schoolofwhispers.com if you want to dive a little bit deeper into Chinese medicine, have a conversation. You don't necessarily have to book a session. You just book a call and we could just have a chat, especially if you have any questions. Unfortunately, I have to go. Let me see, how do I stop share? Yeah, I actually have a ceremony